to be 30 in 5 months, and I feel like I've had like 15 different careers and lives and blah. It's been crazy. So the lies are kind of the underlying pressure.
There's a lot of people going to life transitions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, oh, I'm broken. I got to fix myself to get this.
So there's 3 different realms. Okay, so you have the external physical realm where this is where we're at right now. And it's where you experience things. And then you have the emotional realm, which is in your mind and how you process. And then the spiritual realm where you actually feel it.
Why do you think people worry so much about what other people will think about them? To a point, it just disrupts completely who they are and their vision for themselves.
I think that people struggle with it because they've also been shown and told that that is how you get your way in this life.
Mm-hmm.
It's by people liking you. And I was an appeaser for a long time. An appeaser being someone who gives up all of their authority to make sure everybody around you is happy, even if you are compromising what you know to be right or true. I was compromising my peace, my anxiety, my boundaries, my standards to make sure the story that everybody had about me was concrete.
Hello, guys. Welcome to another episode of House of Impact Podcast. Before we go into the episode, I just have one thing to ask you, which is if you're enjoying the show, please hit the subscribe button so we can keep bringing you bigger, better guests, keep the show going. Let's roll with the episode. I want to start with the correlation, if any, of limiting beliefs and identity.
Well, first of all, so glad to be here. I flew in yesterday from Texas and was feeling awful. And by God's grace, we're here. So I'm just super excited to be here. Man, the correlation between limiting beliefs and identity. Limiting beliefs will come from who you think you are. And so the correlation is that limiting belief, again, will just be dependent on who you think you are. So for example, limiting belief could be, I'm not good enough. Well, the identity and the limiting belief are the same. So I am not good enough. The identity is worthiness. And because you're not good enough per se. And so you start to embody that limiting belief, and then the limiting belief actually becomes your identity because you start to identify with the thing that you believe, and then the belief becomes a story, and then that story determines the decisions that you make, potentially the relationships that you have, the places that you go, the things that you filter in and out of your life. And so I think it's more than just a direct correlation because the belief tends to dictate who you actually think that you are. It could also be sort of what came first, the chicken or the egg question. It's like, do you have the identity and then the limiting, like, does the limiting belief come from the identity, or does, the identity create the limiting belief, or kind of how does that work? And I think there's kind of this ebb and flow. It just kind of depends, but I would say, yeah, there's definitely direct correlation for sure.
So then, like, to change your limiting beliefs, you kind of have to change your identity or who you think you are.
I mean, in theory, yeah. Like it could, it is that quote unquote simple. It depends on the belief, depends on how long you've believed it. One of the things that I say is the revelation can happen in a moment, but it's the application that takes a while. So the other thing is, part of it is just realizing that it is a limiting belief. And that's all that it is a belief. It's not a prison. Like, stating a belief doesn't automatically make you married to that thing. That you are just like stating the filter that you have about something. The work could, again, it's very individualized, but the work would look like figuring out, when was the first time that you did believe that? Who was involved? Did you believe that on your own? Usually not. Or did it come from someone else? Most of the time, we're only born with 2 fears: the fear of loud noises and the fear of lights. That's it. Because you're a baby.
Okay.
So you go from being it's super quiet and super dark to now it's super loud and super bright. And all you want is to be in the dark and quiet again. Everything else is learned. So you learn anxiety, you learn rejection, you learn the feeling of unworthiness. So if they're learned, we can trace it to when you learned it, who you learned it from, what you believed about yourself in that moment. Even the other day, also just to preface, if I clear my throat or sound like Squidward,
Oh, good.
I just for the people listening, there might be a couple noises coming out, but
All
I
good.
was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, "Oh, we were married young." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're not young anymore." Like that's that. But the limiting belief is because this happened 21 years ago. That is the reason we're struggling now. You learned, quote unquote, that you were married young when you were young and got married. But now we're 20 years down the road and it's different, but people are married to the story. The story is so, so powerful. So yeah, that's kind of an example of, yes, if you do change your identity by default, one could say, the limiting beliefs will start to become more apparent because and a limiting belief, the language changes depending on who I'm working with, but it's just a lie. It's like, what's the lie and what's the truth? It's really that simple. It's not easy. It's easier said than done. But what's the lie that I believe about myself? What is it causing me to do? What is it causing me to believe? And what's the truth about it? So that's how you can sort of start to
What was
do
the
that process.
point? Gonna go deep. What was the point in your life that happened to you?
My whole life. I mean, we believe lies our whole life. I've had many different lives. For those that know me, I'm going to be 30, outing myself here. I'm going to be 30 in 5 months, and I feel like I've had like 15 different careers and lives and blah. From, I was an athlete, and then I was in the entertainment industry, and then started entrepreneurship, and then got back into the entertainment industry, and now I'm living in Austin, and it's been crazy. So the lies are kind of the underlying pressure that you feel at any given moment, which again, the story, like I'm so adamant about knowing what your story is. So I mean, the first lie I can believe that I can remember, growing up and being an athlete in America, athletics are, I mean, obviously over in Europe they are too, but was I'm not good enough, and no matter how hard I try, there's always someone better, which is true. That's a true thing. There is always someone better, but that doesn't dictate your quality. And so if I'm now going to practice, assuming I'm already worse, how am I going to show up? Not great. Well, I'm, and a huge false identity I had for a long time was the almost guy, where I was really close for years in everything I did to being the peak. So I was really close to being the best athlete, to making that break in the modeling and acting industry, in the music industry, like in entrepreneurship. I was super, super close. And then you start to identify with the result. So the lie, we believe hundreds of lies every day, and so if the lie is rooted in the result, so because X happened, that must mean this about me, which means what? My worthiness is reliant on X. So if X is like this, I must be worth crap. But if it's good, then I must be worth a lot because look at how the people are treating me now. And so the external validation determines my worthiness, which again is what? A lie. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been believing lies my whole life. I mean, there's lies that I believe now, and that's why it's a daily practice. This isn't a cure all, like, oh, once you do this quick step, you won't believe lies about yourself, and they're going to come, and I have people that come to me and they'll say, we'll talk about what do you want to work on or what area do you want to experience transformation in? I want to have no fear. I was like, okay, so you want to die. Fear keeps you alive at times. And what they're really saying isn't, I want to have no fear. It's, I don't want fear to have me.
Mhm.
I don't want to constantly have fear control my life. So it's prioritize. It's putting that emotion in its place. Having one of the things I like to say is something can have presence, but not authority. And when it starts to have authority, it becomes what? The author of the story. So if fear is the author of the story, then all of your filters and your decisions will come from a place of fear. And so really just kind of nailing that in and realizing most lies also, and it's kind of a tangent, but most lies come from a negative emotion.
Mm.
Well, I don't want to say all, but most. It's a negative emotion with a positive intent, and you learn it. And you either get out of it because you realize it's not true, or you're so stuck in the story that that becomes your life.
It's so funny you say that because I can kind of see that in when I was in high school. I was trying so hard to get into extracurricular English
Mm,
classes. Because like we had no money to put me into English, and I was just saying to my teachers, like, just put me in the class. Like, it would take you like 8 hours a day of studying English to
yeah.
get to this level. Like, you will never speak English.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. And
Mm,
I took that, and then I just went and I grabbed books, and I put like American TV on my TV.
yep.
I put like anything
That's
and
how my
everything.
dad learned English too. Yeah.
I put anything and everything because like I'm very like good with my ear.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept saying myself, I speak English.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
speak English. But I don't speak Spanglish. No, I
Yeah.
speak English. I
Yeah.
speak English.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we're getting to a point that people are like, oh, your English is really good. Where
Mm,
did you learn? I was like, oh, YouTube
yeah.
and TV and books.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to constantly repeat, no. I speak English. Like
Yeah.
reinforce that, which is, I feel like how I've changed a lot of my
Mm,
false identities.
yeah.
Um, how do you go about people that are going through? I don't know if you've seen the trend of like reinvent yourself, like
Mm-hmm.
change your identity. Like, how do you go about people that are in a transitional period in their lives? Like, let's say new career, new
Mm,
business, divorce, even like, I don't know. And they kind of don't know who they are and
mm,
kind of they feel lost. They just feel like they lost it all. How do
mm.
you go about that?
Um, it, it all depends, but I want to start with like one of the things that I say a lot as well in terms of identity crisis, you could call
Mm.
it, is it's a spiritual problem that you're trying to solve emotionally to get a result in the physical world. So to kind of explain that, there's, in my opinion, and again, there's no studies, there's no evidence, whatever. I mean, people could be like, oh, I see that. This is just how my brain works. So there's three different realms. Okay. So you have the external physical realm where just this is where we're at right now. And it's where you experience things. And then you have the emotional realm, which is in your mind and how you process. And then the spiritual realm where you actually feel it. And what happens is when we try to emotionally process something that happens here, the filter's off.
Mm.
But if you start here where you actually have it, you can bypass the emotion, which is why it's the same thing with motivation and discipline.
Mm.
Motivation, I just saw Mel Robbins do this with
Simon
I think it's
Sinek.
Simon Sinek,
Yeah.
yeah. And I love that she worded it the way that she did. I'm pretty sure she said, I think motivation is garbage or
Yeah, she
something.
said exactly.
Yeah,
Motivation is
and I
garbage.
was like, you're so right. And I've been,
Yeah.
teaching that for a long time because motivation could get you started, but discipline is what keeps you going. And motivation is nice and take advantage of it when you have it. But motivation requires the emotional and spiritual connection to do the thing you want to get in the physical. But when you have to make a decision, if you think about it, you're lost. Like you're going to lose because your emotions, I don't really want to do it. But having the spiritual take effect helps you to bypass the emotion to make the decision that you need to make in order to get what you want or not get what you want, but just make it through, like
Yeah.
in I've been working out for almost 17 years now, and probably 40 to 50% of the time I've been motivated. All the other times is got to do what you got to do. And even if it's a crappy workout, it's better. Like a 20-minute crappy workout is better than no workout, unless I'm injured or really sick. And then rest is part of, working out and whatnot. But how I go about people which yes, I have a ton. I've coached close to 1,000 people at this point.
I'm asking this because I know in the audience there's a lot of people going through life transitions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just like, oh, I'm broken. I got to fix myself to get this. Or like,
yeah. And here's the other thing is the reinventing part. And I will say I have sort of an unorthodox and different way of going about it. But what I've noticed from everybody that I work with, and I kind of want to start by saying why I picked identity, because identity coaching is a niche within life coaching, one could say. So there's like high level mental performance coaching, and then there's relationship coaching and behavioral coaching and all this stuff. And identity for me was inspired by a guy named Jamie Winship, who was recruited by the CIA, and he did conflict resolution in the Middle East for 27 years by helping people find their identity in Christ and hear from God. And I was like, okay, maybe not the Middle East, but I definitely want to do stuff like that. Like, it's so cool. And then with my NLP background and everything. And so identity, like you have this quilt of life. Your life is this quilt, and identity is the thread that made the quilt make the picture. And so identity is the thing that underlies and determines and just regardless of mental performance coaching and relationships and all this stuff, like identity is the thing that causes all of those things. So identity in itself is just so powerful, and the identity determines the story and all that. So in terms of quote unquote reinventing, if you're trying to reinvent and it's you that are doing the reinventing, you are the inventor. And the inventor created the problem that you're trying to fix. So you are going to the place that the problem started to try to find the solution with the filter of the problem. So it's like getting into a car that's wrecked and hitting the gas and hearing the car go and wondering why it's not going anywhere. And so I think it's, it depends on the way in which the person is trying to reinvent. And yes, you're reinventing yourself, but what happens with that is you get caught up again in the story and the emotional side of everything, which at times is necessary. You have to, I don't disregard emotions. Of course, emotions are real, but just because it feels real doesn't mean it is true. That's another huge thing, is having something feel real does not make it so. You have to look at the evidence, look at the reality. And it just, when someone is trying to do the spiritual work, I'm not talking about religious work, like everybody is spiritual, which we can get into later, but when they try to solve the spiritual in the emotional, it causes more of a crisis, because the thing that they're trying to use is the place where the problem started. So that's kind of how I would answer that.
How about including God into the picture? I'm just asking because when I went to like a fully like rebuild, reinvent yourself when I came back from Bali, like I was just,
as you would.
I was like, I just got baptized. It was just crazy, like the timing of things. Just got baptized. I was like, okay, the business I'm running, it's not serving God, it's not serving me. And the relationship was also not serving God. And I was just like, okay, like everything out. Like I pray the most powerful prayer that you can pray, but obviously I didn't know back then.
Yeah.
I was like, please, dear Heavenly Father, just prune me. Just make me holy. Like, just take everything that
you ready to lose everything?
It needs to be taken out. Like, please make me holy. Like, whatever. And then, it was crazy on the. This never happened to me. Like on the flight back from Mali, I was just like, my business completely gone. I
Yeah.
was like 50 pounds in my bank account. I'm
Yeah.
like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Relationship gone. House, my high-rise apartment gone.
Yeah.
I'm like,
He's
okay.
like, you asked for it.
I'm like, I'm just sitting there. I was like, okay, what do I have right now? God.
Yeah.
But honestly, I'm just so grateful for that because I could rebuild
Mhm.
and kind of like reinvent, if you want to call it that way, everything with Jesus, like
Yeah.
with God.
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God that happened. I was wrecking myself.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things, again, to kind of touch on the, how do I go about these people? Because people could hear this and go, well, that's great, but what do I do with that? And
Yeah.
the identity is who are you? The thing that you're going through, that you're the in between, the job, the relationship, the whatever. You don't want to find yourself in that again. It's like, who am I in this relationship? No. The reason that you're asking that question is because of who you lost in that relationship. So who are you regardless of the relationship? Who are you regardless of the job? And once you answer that question, when you go back to revisit it, you have a foothold. Like a lot of people that are trying to make these changes are sort of floundering in the water, treading water, hoping that at some point it's just going to get more shallow. But it doesn't. Unless you find out who you are, regardless of all the stuff, like releasing the control that all those things have over you. And so in terms of, you were asking me about God, like how God comes into play. And that's a whole other podcast in itself. But again, in terms of spirit, like I am, like, we are followers of Jesus. And just that statement changes the entire way that you look at everything. Even some people could look at this like, wait, you prayed to God and he took everything away from you? Like, I don't want to follow that God. But when you look at what it does, and at times, if you're in a really deep, dark place and you're the cause of it, what you need is someone to cause you pain to bring you out of it. And the pain is coming from the withdrawals of what you thought was what you wanted. And you can live a really good life in a false identity, in these lies. You can live a great life in these lies. I watch it all the time. And they have the money and they have the relationship and they have the house but I know them. And I hear the behind the door conversations and they're miserable. And, people call me and they just made millions of dollars in their business, this, and I feel nothing. What am I supposed to do with this, Daniel? Like and so that finding who you are outside of what I believe, in terms of God, is it gives you a place to go with everything. So when you're down, when you don't know who you are, like there is a name for you in the kingdom. It's not, well done, Jenny, my podcaster. Well done, Daniel, my coach. That's not it. Our vocation and the things that we do aren't our identity. It's part of the way that they can be expressed. And it just like the grace that we receive is the grace that we give, and the love that we receive is the love that we give. And so if you know that you are loved unconditionally by the eternal God, and you are given grace at which you didn't deserve any of it, and that is the placement from where you start, it really does change the filter which you look at a lot of those things. And obviously I coach people who believe in God and people who don't believe in God, and the thing that changes is just the language. You can still, the principles are still effective, but talking about Jesus as we believe in it definitely changes as well, because you can use the Bible verses of encouragement, and you can talk about the transformation that's done. And my whole identity is based on Romans 12:2, which is, do not be conformed by the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you can discern the will of God. So it's being transformed by the renewing of your mind. How can you transform unless your mind has been renewed? And regardless of whether or not you believe in God, that's a true statement. You can't transform unless something changes here, which is why if you're in a transition and nothing is changing here, that's why there's no transformation, because it's not changing in your soul. You might change how you feel, It doesn't change what's actually happening inside of your soul. And it's a really, and that's where the work has to be done. It has to be done in the spirit, because that's where it started. You feel, regardless of whether or not you believe in God, you will feel a spiritual dissonance when things are wrong. You can just tell that something's off, you know, and people don't know how to explain it. And that's what they say. I don't know how to explain. I just feel this way. And that is something in your spirit going, hold up, something's not right here. This isn't aligned with who you are. So ask that a question. What is missing? What is the thing that I'm missing? Could be that you're missing God. It could be that you know that you're saying yes to things that you should say no to, or no to things that you should say yes to. It could be plenty of different things, but that would be the biggest transformation lies in that spiritual area. Because when this changes, this doesn't have to, in order for you to feel change. Which is why it bothers me when you have this prosperity gospel movement where, you know, people will say, if you believe in God, this will be your best year ever, which is such a load of garbage. Because number one, you're not defining what best year ever means. You're saying it's your best year financially, like all this stuff. Let me tell you something. When I actually started following Jesus, it was one of the hardest years of my life. And I lost everything I thought I was going to be doing. I lost and when I say lost, I didn't mean it was taken from me. It means that I made really hard decisions because of what was put on my heart. Like, it's not this passive, okay, let me sit and pray and God's just going to like take care of all of this for me.
Like on the Bible,
You have to,
it says be still, and people think like, okay, I'm
that
gonna
just
be
means
still.
not moving. Yeah, it means having stillness in your movement. And I was like, okay, I'm no longer with the woman that I thought I was going to marry. I'm no longer doing the career I thought I was going to do for a long time. I'm no longer living in the city I've been living in for almost 10 years. I lost this. I lost this. I lost this. I lost this. And so, and what it does is it gives a false perception to people that are also new believers. And what are we promised in the Bible? That there's going to be persecution and there's going to be struggles. And freedom comes from proper restriction. So if I put a fish on this carpet, is it a fish? Yes. But is it free to be a fish? No. When is it free to be a fish? When I restrict it to the water. So a lot of the time when we are praying to God for freedom, he will restrict and he'll be like, okay, you want freedom? I'm going to take away everything that's not making you free. And I will free you properly, you know? And so it's just this, you know, it could be the best year ever. Yeah, because you're finally getting stripped of all the stuff that's holding you back and it'll be the best for your spirit. But you got to say that, because what happens is these people become Christians. They think life's going to get easier and they expect all this money and favor and blah, 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 blah. And maybe they get nothing. And now they get their teeth kicked in even more and their business fails and they lose their relationship. And they're like, well, I don't want to believe in this God anymore. You know? And so again, what is the purpose of that? It's because of the story that we present. Following Jesus closely, every day you're at war. It's a spiritual warfare. Like the temptation goes up when you believe in Jesus, not because temptation changed, but because now you have a different filter. You know, so all of these things change based off of the spiritual grounds that you have.
Do you know I was not angry at God once when I was at that stage? I was just so wrecked. I'm like, I just felt like a heart stop. It's like, okay, let me just pull you out of this. I'm gonna like break everything that's not serving you, and I'm gonna like rebuild you. And I'm just so glad, because I was like, okay, I didn't have grace and compassion for myself, and now I do.
Yeah.
And I do even more with others. So yeah, like becoming a Christian, like first full year, very, very, very hard. But like he promises us good things.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was something that actually saved me. Like the fact of, oh, I'm not lovable. It's like, no, God loves you. If I would have been because of God and the Bible and Jesus, I don't think I would be here. Like, I'm completely
Oh, me either.
honest. I
Yeah.
would, um, and I think also like how do you? I'm curious. Do you work with your clients on the goals they have for their life and how to achieve them from a place of integrity and from a place of their core values and that's aligned with them?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of goals, it's funny because I have a whole goal setting thing where so there's this analogy I'll give you that I kind of made up. Well, I didn't make it up. God gave it to me. So
Amen.
we made it up together. It's pretty simple, but it's basically, I want you to close your eyes and I want you to imagine that you're in your dream house and you have wherever your laundry room is and your, $5,000 sheets just got done in the dryer and you walk to the dryer and they're so clean and warm and they smell amazing and you hold them to your chest and you just know that feeling when you get those sheets and you just can't wait to make your bed. And so then you walk to your bed and the mattress is covered in like mud and rocks and bugs. It's just disgusting. And these people, it's so funny because they have their eyes closed and they're like, the sheets, they're like, oh, and then I start describing the mattress. They're like, oh. And I said, okay, so now you look at the mattress and you look at the sheets and you put the sheets on the mattress. And then I end the exercise. And I go, okay, that's it. They're like, what the heck? I was like, would you ever do that? No, I would never do that. I'm like, well, we do it every day. And it's when you set new goals in an old identity.
Mm.
And it's no matter how clean the sheets are, no matter how warm they are, no matter how great they are, if that mattress is dirty, at some point, you're not going to know if the sheets are dirty or the mattress is dirty. And it all blends together. So I don't really care. Goals are great. But if the person who set the goals isn't you, and I'm not talking about someone writing out your goals and giving them to you, I'm talking about the spirit that set the goals that came from your mind. If they're not your goals and you're subconsciously projecting what you think you need to accomplish to achieve what someone else might have told you 15 years ago, then the goals don't matter. And that's why when I did this exercise with a company the other day, I'm just talking about, what do you think you need? What do you have to do to get it? And, XYZ. And it's like, okay, how many of you have been wanting to do this for longer than a year? 5 years. Okay. And it keeps going. And I said, okay, so either the emotional connection isn't strong enough or that isn't actually what you want and it isn't actually what you think you need. So I typically, if someone, comes to me, this is what I want to accomplish. In my mind, like, not really, but okay, we'll go with it. So the simple question is, okay, if you achieve X, what would that do for you? Okay, it would give you freedom. And what is freedom? The ability to X. And what does that allow you to do? What allows me to spend more time with my kids? Okay, and what does having more time with your kids mean? Well, it means that I now can fulfill my duty as a father. And what does that allow you to do? My God-given thing. So you don't want to make more money. You want to fulfill your duty as a father. And the reason that when you go to make more money, you feel like crap is because that is the means to the goal, not the actual goal, which is why there's emotional dissonance. Now, I'm not immediately saying you shouldn't want to make more money, but it's when you go to do this thing, you have to know the placement and what it gives you. And most people just set goals because of how it feels. It feels good to want to do good. It feels good to want to get in shape. It feels good to want to make more money. But when you go to work the extra 3 hours or get up an hour earlier to go to the gym and you have that split second to think about why you're doing it, if it's not a spiritual reason, you're going to stay in bed and you're going to go home early from work or whatever it is. So in terms of the goals and helping them achieve what they want to achieve, most of the time I'm helping them figure out that that's not actually what they want to achieve. And they want to achieve it because Coach X or their mom or their teacher when they were 15 said that if they didn't achieve this, they wouldn't amount to anything or they're wasting their talent or they're wasting their effort. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even in companies, especially like scalable commission-based companies, because the level of leadership will match the level of effort that's put in. So for example, if you go into a company and you can make 5,000 a month, 10,000 a month, 50,000 a month, there's certain amounts of work that need to be done. And with those amounts of work and people, there's a certain level and energy of leadership that needs to match that. So if someone only wants to make $1,000 a month, they're not going to give the same amount of effort as someone who wants to make $100,000 a month. Not because they're worse, but because the goals are different. Now, if there's someone who only wants to make $1,000 a month, but they say they want to make 50 because they don't want to look bad, and then they're getting pushed at a $50,000 a month level, how are they going to feel? Overworked, underappreciated, all these things. And leadership isn't going to notice. They're just going to think this person's lazy because they said they wanted to make 50K a month. I have someone making 50K a month. This is what we're doing with them. What are they missing? Let's fire them. And if the person would have just said, you know what, I actually just want to make $1,000 a month, leadership can then go, perfect. I only have to give you $1,000 a month worth of effort. And when you're ready for $2,000 a month, we'll match that and we'll match that and we'll match that. And some people listening to this would go, well, if there's a 50K option, they only want to make 1K, they shouldn't even be working there. And that's their problem with the narrative about what they think is worthy or whatever the case may be. And so there's and what is that? Is communication and telling the truth. Like the truth will set you free, but it doesn't set you free just from, it sets you free to. So it sets you free from the place that you thought you were, but it sets you free to do the thing that you actually are supposed to do, the thing that you're actually called to do, and it's, I can't remember if it's Buddha or Gandhi or, I mean, this has been repeated so many times. It's better to be hated for who you are than loved for who you are not. Being hated sucks, but it makes you feel better when you know it's because of who you are. Because you're going to be disliked regardless. So if you're going to be disliked, you might as well be disliked for the person that you are, not like, dang, they don't like me and they don't like my false identity. What the heck is that about? So yeah, that's what I would say about that.
Why do you think people worry so much about what other people will think about them? To a point, it just disrupts completely who they are and their vision for themselves.
I think it's a lot of different reasons, but I would say, and it's definitely heightened with the technology coming up. Like a lot of it is just because of social media. You have so much more. The more you have to compare yourself to, the more you will worry about what the people you're comparing yourself to think about you, even if you never meet them. Didn't happen as like back in the day, tribal leader has 10 more goats than I do or whatever, 10 more sheep. And well, he has more sons than I do. And so people would always find stuff to compare to, but the people that care the most just they've determined that that's the way that they feel loved and appreciated and connected and worthy and all of these things. And so I think that people struggle with it because they've also been shown and told that that is how you get your way in this life. It's by people liking you. And I was an appeaser for a long time. An appeaser being someone who gives up all of their authority to make sure everybody around you is happy, even if you are compromising what you know to be right or true. Now, when I say compromise, I don't mean like morally. I was doing wrong things to make sure people were happy, but I was compromising my peace, my anxiety, my boundaries, my standards to make sure the story that everybody had about me was concrete.
Why do you think that was?
Insecurity and coming from, and just fear. One of the big fears that I had, not as much now, I mean, still now, which I think is a pretty common fear, is the fear of being misunderstood and not being able to do anything about it, which also being misunderstood is also a fear of injustice, where you're being unjustly accused for something that you can't go on trial for to defend. And then when you start to defend it and show the evidence, they disregard you. And so that's why I was so adamant on controlling the story, because I knew people put in evidence that isn't there. I hear it. I saw this post I put on Facebook like 8 years ago or something. And I was like, isn't it funny how I learn more about myself from other people than I do from myself? It was because I'd heard so many stories about me. It's like, where are you guys getting this information? That's not true. None of that happened. But by the time it got to me, the story's already established. And so then when I come, well, of course you're going to say that because it's about you, and so, yeah, I think it just comes from, yeah, in terms of what you were saying originally, from being kind of the hero. People want to be the it person in other people's story, and so we'll overlook all of the stuff in front of us to try to get what the other person has on the other side of them, not knowing that might not even be what they want, and it's that classic quote of, uh buying things, gosh, I always mess up. But it's trying to impress people with things you don't need. Oh, spending money you don't have on things you don't need to impress people you don't like. All three of those things, pointless. But for what? Because of how it makes us look, And so wanting to seem a certain way versus being a certain way are very different.
How did you heal that? How did you change that to embracing what's true for you?
A lot of therapy, but no, in all seriousness, God, for sure. A lot of inner work, a lot of making mistakes that almost cost me everything, and being, by his grace, like, saved from it, and getting to these. We create leverage for ourselves. In order for us to get out of a situation, we need leverage of some sort. And so if you're stuck, there just needs to be a different point of leverage. And so God, sometimes not always in his grace, but sometimes, would sort of allow me to wander off to create my own leverage, because I like to make mistakes all by myself. And it's funny, kind of a side note. A lot of the times people will blame the devil for stuff that we're responsible for.
Oh, that's so true.
The devil's not omnipresent. It's like, bro, that wasn't the devil. That was just you being stupid. And so, but no, I did do therapy and a lot of prayer, a lot of self work. And then even through my certifications and my coaching and all that stuff, I just kind of learned how to use the stuff I learned from therapy, plus actual revelations that I had, plus prayer, plus journaling, plus conversations that I had, and then just kind of over time got better and broke away from that narrative. And then there was a very specific point last October. I went to this men's retreat in LA, and that's when I really started like, I've been a Christian my whole life,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't have on this day at this time, this is when I became a believer. There's never been a moment in my life I can remember without God, believing in him. People could look at my life and be like, there's no way you believe in God, because people that believe in God don't act like that. And they would be right that they don't act like that. And I did. So there's many times where I took the Lord's name in vain, which isn't cussing. It's doing something that he would never condone, and basically saying that he's a part, like, oh yeah, I'm a believer. And then I go to the club and whatever. And anyway, this retreat, I realized I had been missing it. It was very theological, very doctrine, I can go toe to toe with anybody about the Bible and doctrines and theology. And even I, studied not extensively, like people could school me on a lot of things, but in terms of Catholicism and Buddhism and Hinduism and Islam and Judaism, like, I studied a lot of different things to be able to have conversations with people, which is great. But I remember, I was like, okay, God, what do you want me to know? And he was like, well, your knowledge is keeping you from me.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's an interesting thing to say. Well, what does the Bible say about the wisdom of men? Well, 1 Corinthians 3:19 talks about, let any man who thinks he's wise in this age become a fool, so that he can become wise, because the wisdom of man is foolishness. It's like, so he was right. So all this knowledge I was trying to get for 2.5 over COVID, I was studying like theology so crazy because I wanted to know. It's like, you know about me, but you don't know me, and even, Taylor Swift, let's say, There's people that know everything. They know when she wakes up. They know when she's traveling. They know her favorite Starbucks drink. They know her concert, every lyric to the song, blah, blah. I'm telling you, you show up to her house, Taylor, it's me. I know, blah, blah. She'd be like, I don't know who you are. Go away. You know everything about me, but you don't know me. And that's how it was with God for me. I knew so much about. But it's that oneness that I didn't have. I had it. I wasn't experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started following Jesus and paying more attention to what his ministry looked like and what it means to walk in the Spirit and to have the mind of Christ and to live in that. Not like God's out there, which I didn't believe this, but I feel like it's easy to kind of get into this. God's out there, we're here. When I pray, I'm trying to call him in and then hope that my life changes. And that's kind of just what we do. And it's kind of like a pick and choose. But the kingdom of God is at hand. And the direct translation is it's in within. We have the Spirit within us. 1 Corinthians 2:16, we have the mind of Christ. So we have his mind and we have his Spirit. And I was just letting it chill there. I wasn't doing anything with it. And so the crazy thing is once I started following that, my whole life changed. I got my identity through tears and a lot of struggling. Here's the hard thing. Once you have your identity, you then decide if you're going to live in it or not. God doesn't force it upon you.
Mm.
I could, because I was constantly asking, okay, who am I? What do you want me to do? And I wasn't getting an answer. I wasn't getting an answer because it was still out of fear. Then my identity became in getting an identity. I was like, God, I know there's an identity for me. Why don't you? It's like, he was like, well, why don't you think that you're getting it yet? I'm like, I know why. Okay, I'm just trying to. Okay, I don't want it out of fear. Do you? No, I still do. Okay. Because you can't lie. He knows, and he's so gracious. It was so funny. But yeah, in all of that, then you get it, and then you go to make decisions. You're like, oh, now I actually have to do something about this. You have to have that hard conversation. You have to leave that person. You have to leave that job. You have to. When I say you have to, of course you don't have to, but the identity that you now have doesn't allow that thing to exist within. It doesn't make that thing inherently bad.
Mm-hmm.
It just means in order for me to pursue what I felt like God was calling me to, I had to make a lot of hard decisions that looked really crazy, potentially illogical to everybody involved. And it's just me and God. And this is what he wants me to do. And I'm going to obey. And, people are like, well, how do you know that you made the right decision? I said, I don't.
You'd never.
But it's not
know.
about what makes it right. The result? Well, then the result determines the decision. So why make it anyway? If I'm dependent on the result. Now, obviously, there's some situations that are a little easier. Like if I walk across the street when a car is coming, I know that's not going to be the right decision because the result is I'm going to get hit by the car. I'm talking about in terms of the spiritual and emotional decisions. And I want to be mindful because I just know where people's mind goes. It's not a means for, and shouldn't be, for emotional manipulation. Where you go, I have this new identity, God told me to do this, so you and I are breaking up, and that's it. And there's no thought behind it, and there's no, you just, And that also is taking the Lord's name in vain. Where it's just you, because that is an emotional thing, where what people a lot of the time will do is they'll act on an emotion and just slap God on it. Because it feels good, and God feels good, right? All the time, God feels great. No, definitely not. Sometimes, and this, I was talking to the podcast I sent you with John, and I said, people are just afraid to tell God the truth. Like, God, you kind of suck right now. And this is part of the relationship. I'm still getting to know you, but this really sucks. And I know you kind of told me to expect this, and I know you're here, but I don't feel like you're here. Mm-hmm. And that is true prayer, is confess, because he knows it's true. He what's he gonna say? Oh, yeah. I didn't know that.
I even had ones like, God, I'm listening right now. Like, I can hear you. Like, are you really here? Like, I don't trust you. Like, yep. I was like really honest. Yeah. And then because I was so honest with him, I was just like, look, this is me. Like, this is what you get right now. And then whenever I was way more sensitive for signs,
Yeah.
like this.
Yeah.
And before I was just like,
Yeah.
God is good all the time.
Yeah.
All the time, God is good.
Yeah. Which he is good all the time.
He is, yeah.
But in that goodness, you could still be like, where is it? Where is the goodness here?
Yeah.
And one of the things John MacArthur says, he's a really famous pastor that I have so much respect for, but he was saying, God allows us to go through things not to prove our faith to him, but to prove our faith to us. God doesn't need to know how faithful we are. He knows how faithful we are. We are the ones that doubt our faith because we can't see. So when you get on the other side of that thing, you're like, oh, like you and I are both sitting on the other side of the things we thought, how do you get out of this? What is happening? And we're sitting here talking about it in the past. And I don't have anxiety talking about it. And I'm talking about it with gratitude. I can tell you right now, at that time, I did not feel that way. I was yelling at God. I was cursing at him. I was angry. I was crying. I was like, this is what? Everything in a couple months? Really? Okay, here I am.
I remember a conversation, we were just chatting on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
And you were not as secure as you are now.
Yeah, and definitely in that moment. And then what happens is if you get stuck in the emotion, you miss the work that's happening.
Yeah.
And that's why, when you start to have that emotion, if it's a negative one, the follow-up question to that could be, okay, what do I believe about myself right now? I have this anxiety. What do I believe? Anxiety is essentially, I feel like it's a lot of different things. Other than being a projection into the future and feeling something you don't want to feel from a situation that hasn't happened, it's also, you're thinking about a punishment, essentially. Because you feel anxiety because of a bad outcome. And it's like you're getting punished. So you're fearing this punishment. And people don't want to get punished, obviously. But you as you kind of embody that, and if you identify with the anxiety, then you embody the feeling of that punishment, and then that's how you step into it, regardless of whether or not it happens. Which is really important. And I was just going on this whole tangent, and I had 5 different sentences happen at once, and I forgot what I was going to say after that. Yeah. So
we're just going to wrap up here. Thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the podcast. Thank you so much for catching up after 8 years.
7 years, yeah. Barcelona, circa 2018.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this, guys, helps you a lot. And if you have any questions, we'll be linking Daniel's Instagram on the description.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi guys, it's your host here, Jenny Core. If you made it this far, I hope that this episode has helped you heal, grow, expand in some way. It would mean the world if you can subscribe, like, and comment, because it's gonna help the podcast grow massively. Your support means the world to me and to my team. And we're just gonna bring you better content, bigger guests. So please just support the podcast if you can. And if you think this is gonna help someone, please share it with them. I'll see you next Thursday.